Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Welcome, Chris Bauer, CEO of Endurance Federal Credit Union. I'm so happy that you are going to be on the podcast today. And as I was telling you in a little introduction with our buddy Ben-Jamin, that I have a bromance with you in the movement, talking about leadership and culture and just following each other and doing that, and have done that for years. And seeing each other at some major conferences has always been a real plus for me. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. So one of the things we like to do is called connection before content. So it's just to know a little bit of something about you. And I know that you have so many leadership quotes and things that you put out there every day. But what is one of your favorite quotes or your favorite places to go get a quote?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. I think a lot of times it's things that, when we talk about going to get a quote, I think if something is happening in my own life or something that I see going on within our organization that makes me think, what kind of quote would fit what's going on right now? The kind of struggles that someone in my organization or a group in my organization may be having, then I might go out to someone like Simon Sinek, or, obviously John Maxwell is a good place to go get quotes. Or maybe I'll just type something in looking for something about a particular struggle or a type of leadership saying that I'm looking for, and then just kind of look that way and see what I can find. But I would say my favorite, I don't know if I actually have a favorite. I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that one. I'm not sure I have a favorite one.
Okay, good. So on one of your posts, one of the things you said is not enough people recognize this. The greatest power you have is your ability to walk away from toxic people, from idiots, and from those who don't care about you.
That was today.
Okay, yeah, I know, dude. That's why I said I'd bring it up.
That's true.
What was happening there?
I just think that, I don't think there was anything specific to that one. I just really liked the quote when I saw it. When I saw it, I just thought to myself, sometimes on a Monday, someone just needs a wake me up. You're trying to get the week started. You're coming off a weekend. You might have had some struggles, and you're just not really looking forward to going back to whatever it is that's going on, either work or personal or whatever. Maybe you just need a reminder that you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with those kind of people or that kind of relationship or that type of environment. I mean, you really have a choice, and you can really make your own decisions.
Absolutely. My mom used to say is, why do you spend time? Like, she noticed that I was trying to gain the affection or the attention of some other people because I thought they were popular. She would ask me, she would say, why do you spend, or what is the reason that you're spending so much time trying to get these people to love you when there are already people who love you that you could spend more time with? So she always said, really seek out those individuals who already want to be a part of what you are, and don't worry about the quantity of your friends, but the quality of your friends will be much better. So I kind of thought about that from this, and toxic people that you don't like or you don't want to spend time with, but yet sometimes they occupy a lot of our thoughts. It's like, that's crazy. It's totally crazy. Yeah. So I did start out in the beginning mentioning a little bit about you, but why don't you go ahead and give our listeners a little bit more of a background about what makes you tick?
What makes me well, I would say I'm a very competitive person. I've been in the credit union industry since, gosh, I'm going to age myself here, since '96. When I first started, doing loan admin, loan processing work. Before that, I was doing, customer service type jobs, a little collection work here and there. But I would say the one thing that my team would say about me is that I'm very competitive, but I'm very fair, when it comes to, how I treat them. I'm very open in my conversations, very direct, and letting people know where they stand with me. But I just strive to be the best, run the best organization. I want people to want to be here. I want people to enjoy coming to work. I don't want to be on the other side of that quote that I had this morning. You know what I mean? I want people to actually want to come here, enjoy being here, and being around the people that we hire, because that's the kind of people that we want here.
Excellent. So Ben, you're going to ask him the first question?
I'm going to ask the first question, and
I know you think we've done this.
I know,
before,
but I just want all right, is there another way to phrase it? I just got to get it there. Nope. So a lot of folks can come up with a lot of different things, and you gave some very interesting comments in the intro intake. What is the experience that you're prepared to share with our listeners today?
What is it that I'm willing to share with them?
Correct, or wanting to share today? Because there's so many things that we could talk about as leaders that you probably throughout your career.
Right. What I get asked a lot, and I think it's just very important, especially to the young people today, is that, I see, and even sometimes in our organization, the one thing I always want young people to take away is that you should always take on as much responsibility as you possibly can when you're coming up. So many times you hear people, that's not my job description, I don't get paid to do that. The one thing that helped me coming up is that when I got into positions at the credit union, I wanted to be a sponge and take everything that I could in. And it didn't matter if it was in my specific job role at that time, or if it was part of my, pay grade. I wanted to know because it was going to help me moving forward. If you have any aspirations of moving up the ladder, then you really have to learn as much as you can at different areas in the credit union. And I just think some people today just get so caught up into, that's just not my job. I don't want to do that one. I don't want to learn that right now or whatever, because I don't get paid for it. I think you're just doing yourself a disservice. You pay all this money to go to college to get a degree, right? Well, working every day is just like that. You're always learning something that's going to help you down the road, and create a skill set that will make you more promotable.
Right. And the way I hear what you're saying is it's kind of moving from the point of entitlement to engagement.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, and for us, engagement always operates around the three strategic elements of cohesion, which are belonging, which leads to inclusion, value, which is meaningful work, and mutual commitment, which is collaboration, which operates in the spirit of need and trust. So that what it sounds to me that you're speaking to is to have individuals feel like they are included, that they are valued, that they are needed, and they are trusted. So that is a great foundation, and I love that. What was a mistake that you made early on in your career that may even speak more life to that, or something completely different?
Oh, I would say it was a different time, early on in my career, as far as, leadership and employee development was going on. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. The word empathy wasn't even thrown around early on in my career. You didn't even think about empathizing with someone. It was basically get to work on time, do your job, don't complain, and just, go home. And, the one thing I think, I think if anything, I probably didn't attach myself to the right types of leadership and mentors to show me something other than that. I had to learn that on my own, as far as being more, because I'm a completely different leader than I was when I first started. So I would say probably not, doing a little bit more self-analysis and what I was learning and who I was learning it from. And, so that way it probably made the curve a little bit steeper for me as far as leadership goes.
Okay. And I didn't know the Chris Bauer 1.0. I know the Chris Bauer
No.
2.0.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you talk about that, because for me, the same thing is true. And Ben, you can speak to that about how different you may be
Yeah.
today than what you were in the beginning. And I often go back to Jack Welch and, think about some of his teachings and learnings and things that we followed in the very beginning. But later in his life, when he wrote the book Winning with his wife, he had a very different perspective. And what we tend to sometimes quote now is the later Jack Welch, not the earlier Jack Welch, because some of those philosophies he had early on, the ones you were speaking to, don't necessarily work today.
Balance the bottom line by slashing jobs.
Yeah,
like that he brought that on in the 80s.
Find
right?
your 10% and get rid of the 10% and just keep always churning that group. And that's not what we do. We believe in retaining talent in an organization.
And coaching and bringing them up and all those things. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Chris, can you think of any, what did it cost you? So your early career, when you weren't thinking in the empathetic terms, when you didn't have that type of leadership prowess, what might have that cost you in organizational terms, you personally or relationally?
Oh, I do. If anything, I think it'd be more relationally. I think it was more, I didn't really have, and again, it's hard to be someone's friend and be their supervisor, but I think there's a balance there. And I think at that time it was strictly, there was no type of balanced relationship there at all. There was, and again, back then there wasn't, you didn't have talk of being inclusive or even, sharing visions of being transparent. That's one thing I've learned too, is I think as an organization is going to strive, everyone has to be on the same page, and you need to be transparent in your vision and your strategy. Where before it seemed like all that was hidden. If you weren't a manager, you didn't know. You're just supposed to show up and this is what I want you to do. And this is no reason why that we're doing this or anything. And I think that hurts as well. But I just think it was more or less, it was just strictly come in, do your job, get your job done. And I didn't really care about what was going on in your personal life. I didn't care about any of that. Where before I do, I have a general caring and compassion for what goes on in my employees' lives, where before I didn't have that.
Yeah. And when you talked about empathy, how does empathy show up for you? Like, how do you now incorporate empathy within your leadership?
Well, again, I think it's pretty much just letting them know that you care and you value them, and that you understand that they have a life outside of work, and you got to help them, figure out a way, if need, how to balance that. And I think before you didn't care. Work is work. You leave that at the door. Your personal stuff at the door, and I don't want to hear about it. And you just do your job. Where now you realize that you're dealing with real human beings here with real issues outside of work, and you have to empathize with that.
Yeah, I've often thought of it as empathizing is figuring out how to walk in somebody else's shoes.
Yes.
Not cramming them into yours.
Right. No, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
I've being of a different generation than both of y'all, to some degree.
Don't let the hair color.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is two-part, same company. So before my wife and I acquired the kayaking outfitter that we had, I was co-worker to my now employees. So I was buddy with them, did all the shenanigans, all that kind of stuff. And then now not only am I just the boss, I'm the owner of the company, right? So I had to learn how to turn that friend thing off to some degree, but also it's a very lighthearted organization. But on the second thing, we have a manager that's in her late 60s and still managing, physically active with our organization. And it's been an interesting observation and push with a lot of reluctance on her end with her generation of show up to work, do your job. And that's how, when I started working there, because I'm on with that mindset for many ways. I just want to get the work done. I love working and I love producing whatever. And it's been a really interesting watch for the last 7 years that we've owned the company, of her asking questions, getting folks to do the work and finding out why certain things happen versus always jump to conclusions. Like she doesn't care that something happened along the way. It's you're late, now something has to happen with it. Instead of asking some questions of, that they might find out that something happened in their personal life or whatnot. So it's been a very interesting thing to watch that empathy growth from somebody that didn't want to grow personally at all. And that's where, and I feel fine sharing this because she is very adamant of that. She doesn't want to grow. She doesn't want to change. She doesn't want to develop. And yet,
yes, she is.
But she is.
Yes.
Because she's going tooth and nails, and she appreciates it. Like we've added some new technology into our program, and she'll come back and say, this has really made our life a lot better because now I get to focus on this part of the business instead of doing all this minutia. And so it's fun watching a mindset change of, I don't want to be empathetic. Dang it, I like people a little more now. So
aside from the empathy, what's a big mind shift change for you? What was something, maybe even think back to, what was an assumption that you made that now no longer would be true today?
I think a lot of it goes back to what you said. There used to be this mindset that just people can't change. People are set in their ways and they're just who they are, and there's just not going to be any change in them. And, we had an employee fall right in line to what you were just talking about, that, she had been here for 30 years and she's been here since she was young. I mean, she's still, very active. She's in her 50s. So you can tell she started very, very young here at the Credit. So she's basically, her life has been this Credit well before I got here. And I honestly just thought that she was one of those people that just wasn't going to get it, just wasn't going to change, wasn't going to adhere to the type of culture that we were trying to develop here. And I thought it was going to get to a point where there was going to be a separation. And, we started developing a new system of, meeting with our team and having open communication with them and coaching with them, and thought, well, you're going to either opt somebody in or they're going to opt themselves out to what we're trying to do here. I would have thought she would have been an opt out. And then she did a complete 180. And like the employee you were talking about, it just shocked everyone with her amount of change and how she's works with other of the employees here at the credit union. And it's been really eye-opening to see, for sure.
It's that desire. You can have all of the factors in place as a leader. You can provide people with a good employment job description or responsibilities. You can provide them with their salary. You can give them a title. You can give them the resources they need, the equipment. But the reality is, if a person doesn't desire to do it, then it's not going to happen. No matter how much you push at it, you have to do that. What was a shift for you specifically? Now, I know we've already talked about a number of things, but what's something new that you may have had a shift for yourself that changed from, it's now a desire, versus before it was just like, yeah, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't?
I don't know if I've had like a huge shift. You talk about me personally as a leader?
Right, because the opportunity for our listeners is to learn where you may have made a mistake and you actually then got yourself out of it. So it's a little bit of an exercise we think of as like mentoring through mistakes. So we want to really know a little bit more about the things that you may not have done well in the beginning, but now you figured it out, so that we can help those people who are listening go, aha, I'm feeling the same way. And, Chris did this, I should try that. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
Right. Well, I would say that early on when I got, when I was here at this particular credit union, I did a lot of listening to the executive team that I had here and try to understand, the overall culture that was going on. And I think maybe what I did is I listened maybe a little bit too much. And then instead of just going with my gut and what I really felt like we should do, and we end up incorporating this type of leadership development program that all along, that if we'd have done that, I think we would have turned the corner as an organization even sooner. but I kept hearing this feedback, like this isn't going to work. How are you going to monitor this? What kind of matrix are we going to use? How is this going to work? And instead of just sticking to my guns and feeling like there's something that we needed to incorporate in our organization, we didn't do it for quite some time. And then finally, there was an aha moment, like we really need to do this. And it's really worked. It's been fantastic for us.
Yeah, it is a fine balance to know the difference between when I need to listen and then when I need to take an action. And
Right.
there are some factors that you can take into consideration when you're making that choice or making that decision. I think the opportunity that you talked about was listening to people first, getting that information, and then don't be afraid to make a decision, pull the lever.
Which is cooperative.
Yeah, which is kind of moving forward. So if we looked at a leadership style, we would say that's cooperative because we were gaining the information from others, but you still make the choice and decision yourself.
And the slowdown process was trying to be more collaborative and trying to get a group's consensus. And that can be very difficult when everybody's going to have a say in it, but you ultimately have to make the decision.
Yeah, have to decide, what to do from that. So, all right. So that sounds really great. And then what would be like your top 2 or 3 advices that you would give people just in general? Like, this is an emerging individual. This person isn't necessarily a leader of people, but they are someone that you would want to say, here is some good foundation for you. What are some of those things that you want to give them as good foundation?
Well, I would always tell people to, read as much as you can on, get leadership books. And one thing I see that most young leaders struggle with is having difficult conversations. Everyone wants to be a boss, and everyone likes, like you mentioned before, the titles and responsibility and giving all that power. But then when it comes down to it, do you want to have those crucial conversations with people? And I don't just even mean just your the employees that work under you, but also your peers. And it seems to me through my career, even with the executives I have here, if any of them struggle with one thing, it's having those conversations, those difficult conversations. So I would say you really need to work on developing those skills for sure. Because going back to what we were just talking about with incorporating that culture and bringing in this new program, I had some very difficult conversations with people about the fact that we were going to do this. This is what I see as, us developing as an organization, why we're going to do it. And again, it doesn't have to be because you're having to learn how to choose somebody out. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying having a real good conversation with someone and finding out, what that person is passionate about, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what makes them unhappy. But you need to have those conversations with people. And again, going back to what I said earlier, take on the as much responsibility and roles as you can to develop your skills. Diversify your background, because if something down the road comes open, you want to be able to be prepared for it.
Yeah, so it's really like increasing your learning, right,
Yeah.
Ben? Ben, you're an avid reader of books, and so that is how your formal education, or at least the
Right.
education that you've gone through. I have a very different path. I went through very formal education through, my undergraduate degree, my MBA, then my PhD, and you have a little different path for your learning. But what we're actually saying to people, what Chris is saying, is that you need to be engaged into a conversation of learning. That's how you grow, develop, and advance, is that you get this information and then you find a way to use it. He was talking about having conversations around this information that you're learning and being able to apply it and putting it to use, and getting this trusted voice or this mentor or this coach, this accountability partner that you can bounce this information off of to really help you decide where you move, can be better, because it's so much better to know this stuff up front than it is to make the mistake and have to go back and correct it and fix it.
That's where I love the Mark Twain quote of "Don't let schooling get in the way of your education." And we want to give the young leaders, emerging leaders, permission to invest in themselves and have those conversations and mess up and make mistakes. Chris, but I want to ask a question. In your leadership journey, and I know the answer is going to be yes, but I want to see how you handled. There's a mindset now of pay me and I'll do the more work, versus an old school mindset maybe of do the work and then you'll get the extra pay and all that. But there's been a challenge where we've seen a younger generation that's watched their parents do that, only to be taken advantage of in a corporate system where they worked over and over again, did the overtime and never and was overlooked. So how do you balance that mindset of go the extra effort before the money comes in and then where you'll get rewarded later, versus okay, you're going to do the work once the money comes in? How have you encountered that, and how do you handle that?
Well, I would say from my personal perspective, if in fact you're doing it and it's not paying off where you are, then you need to go someplace else that will appreciate you for that. And that's what I did. I took on some of these roles and responsibilities and saw that it may not be getting me where maybe I would see myself in the organization where I'm at currently. So I start looking for avenues outside the organization or other organizations that maybe would appreciate that. I do think that other people will appreciate it, maybe not where you're at, but I think that they will down the road.
Before you started looking for other opportunities, did you have any conversation with upper management to say, hey, I've been doing these other things, I don't feel like I'm getting the financial compensation or recognition or whatever your goals were? Did you have those conversations, or were you just hoping that they were going to notice and pay you more? Like, what was that situation like?
Well, it depends on, yes, I did. And again, a lot of it is how open those organizations were to letting me have those kind of conversations with them. But if I felt like they would open the door for those, sure, I expressed my, thoughts about where I thought I was and, where I felt like I either needed them to help me continue to develop some of those skills so I could help them further, or, did they see a path for me based upon some of the things I was, doing. And, unfortunately, some companies are so big, the bureaucracy won't even allow your existing supervisor to even allow them to even do that. And I did run into that. And I did have to make a decision. Well, if you're telling me based upon the rules of this entire organization that I can't go any further than I am based upon all the skills and everything I've done for the organization, then I would have to look further. And that was just a conversation I had to have with them. Just be truthful and honest.
And so gearing up for that conversation, so that's really great background for, okay, this is how I'm preparing my mind for the conversation, getting myself prepped. What are some of the other factors that you have to take into consideration before you can bring that conversation up to your supervisors? What did you have to think through? Because I'm assuming you just didn't walk down the hallway and say, hey, Mr. Smith, I want to talk to you about an increase.
No
right?
problem.
Yeah. You would have some sort of an idea. So how did you think that through?
Well, again, I think I just kind of gauged the temperature on how open that person was going to be with that conversation. A lot of times it would be on top of another conversation we were having in regards to, it could have been at evaluation time. It could have been at some sort of meeting that we were having about something. To me, I was just always felt like I was a pretty good judge of being able to read the room and seeing if that was an opportune time to have that type of conversation. If not, then you just have to be upfront and say, hey, there's just something I would like to talk to you about when you have time, and make sure you have all your thoughts, all lined out before you go in there. You just don't want to go in there and just start, spewing off, hey, I want more money and you're not treating me fairly, because they're just going to shut you off if you start acting that way. So it really needs to be a real collaborative, transparent conversation.
Yeah, it's really great.
They might be able to create a plan for you and say, okay, great. Well, I hear that. Well, in 6 months we can do this. And then you check in. If that's not the case, then you can make other decisions.
Right.
So I want to give permission to any listeners out there that I'm always going to advocate doing more than you're ever asked or paid for. Having that conversation. And if not, go elsewhere. I mean, you've got to look out for you. And this is, funny coming from the retention people, but as the individual, you've got to always do more than you're asked. And then somebody will recognize it and you will get rewarded in many ways, some way down the line.
Right,
100%.
Yeah, because the way it works, having spent 30 some years in a C-suite position, it's not too far off today, still today. And that is, you want to act like whatever the role is, that this career you want. So if you do want to be a manager or a leader of people, you have to act like that before you get the job. Because what the hiring person or the decision maker is doing is they are actually looking to see, do you have the skills? Do you have the ability to do this? And then you get to be thought of and moved on into it. So I kind of like, that's why I want to go back to the very beginning of this entitlement versus engagement, is to really find that where I see mistakes being made in today's workforce is just operating under that entitlement. I deserve this. I should have this. I've seen how others are treated. But think of engagement. So if you were engaged in the activity of leading people, making people leading decisions, and that doesn't mean that you're bossing people around in the office where you're working. It's not mean you're bossing them around, but it could be in having those development conversations with your supervisor by saying, here's something I noticed. I would, think it maybe this might be an opportunity. If I were leading this group and I were to do this, what are your thoughts? Because even in your discussions of, I want a promotion, there are some very key things to do. Socializing, understanding how your leader, how that supervisor thinks before you get there, the timing of when you have that meeting. And one of the advantages that we offer is that through our work, we offer an AI-powered leadership assistant. He's called Carl, for the Cohesive Artificial Response Leader. And individuals can use Carl to ask him questions. And one of the key questions that people have been asking Carl lately is, how do I approach my boss for a promotion? And through our book, Becoming a Cohesive Leader, and the response that Carl has and that knowledge and information we provided, he gives them 4 or 5 steps to think of and to take. So I think it's a matter of, if you are going to approach your supervisor for a promotion, you might want to check out how other people have done it before you decide to do it on your own. Otherwise, you'll have an experience possibly, because it may not work out exactly.
I can tell you a way that doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. You always share a lot of wisdom, following you on LinkedIn, paying attention to what you put out in leadership and what you put out into culture. And one of the reasons why it's such a bromance is because you are doing the things that you expect other people to do. You may not be perfect about it. You may have missed from time to time, but you are intentionally putting things out there and being leaders. And for individuals who are not following you on LinkedIn or any other social media, they're missing out on a great opportunity to gain some super duper wisdom.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. So what is a question that you thought we were going to ask you today that we didn't?
I think most people, and I think you might have prefaced it with one of your questions prior to me being on the podcast, but a lot of people ask like something about you that someone doesn't know. I think a lot of people like to ask those types of questions for sure.
Oh, good. So tell us something about you that's not on your resume.
Like I said, you asked me the question early on. I think one of the preliminary questions, but I was actually an on-air personality out of college. My degree was in communications. So I was actually like playing music and doing sports, and my whole dream was I was going to be on ESPN or something someday, but I guess I have a different path now. So everything happens for a reason, as my mom used to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could have done a little version of Chatting with Chris. So it could have been, hey, there's still maybe an opportunity for you. So don't.
You never know. Well, I actually, here in Duncan, America, when my kids were playing high school basketball, the local little radio station the gentleman who was doing the games at the time actually had me come in and do some games with him.
Sweet.
So I actually got to live some of my past glory on the radio days and did a few of high school basketball games. So kind of get that out of my system. I can say I did it. So, anything to give back.
That's great, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. And as we close out all of our cohesion culture programs with this simple mantra, we remind everyone who's listening, you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.